Hello and welcome to Short Times, where we bring you brief, concise recaps of all your favorite movies. Today, we're talking about Matilda, the beloved musical adaptation of Roald Dahl's classic children's novel. In the beginning of the film, we see a hospital full of proud parents showing off their newborn babies. However, Mr. and Mrs. Wormwood are not among them, despite the fact that they have just had a daughter, Matilda. Despite their initial disbelief at Mrs. Wormwood's pregnancy, they end up raising Matilda as their own, albeit referring to her as a boy. Matilda is a bright and book-loving child, with her only friend being the local librarian, Mrs. Phelps. One day, the Wormwoods are visited by a school inspector and one of the teachers from Cruncham Hall, a school in the area. They express concern that Matilda has not been enrolled in school due to her parents' neglect. The kind-hearted teacher, Miss Honey, takes an interest in Matilda and tells her about the subjects she will learn at school. Mr. Wormwood becomes upset at the idea of being fined for not giving Matilda an education and decides to bring in the school's strict headmistress, Miss Trunchbull, to deal with the situation. In a mischievous act, Matilda sneaks into her parents' bathroom and puts hair dye in Mr. Wormwood's tonic, turning his hair green as a result. The following day, Matilda walks to Cruncham Hall and arrives early. She is spotted by Mrs. Phelps and the two spend some time together, with Matilda telling her a fictional story about an escapologist and his wife, an acrobat, who perform dangerous but impressive feats in their circus. As the school bell rings, signaling the start of the school day, Matilda sets off for her first day at Cruncham Hall. At school, Matilda quickly becomes friends with another new student, Lavender. The older, more experienced students warn them about what they can expect at the school. Matilda impresses her teacher, Miss Honey, by solving equations written on the board, despite misunderstanding her request to polish off the board. Miss Honey takes Matilda under her wing and recognizes her intelligence and love of learning. However, Matilda's time at school is not easy, as she must contend with the abusive and hateful headmistress, Miss Trunchbull. Matilda also faces difficulties at home, as her parents do not value education and do not understand her love of reading and learning. Despite these challenges, Matilda finds comfort in her friendship with Lavender and Miss Honey, and discovers that she has telekinetic powers, which she uses to stand up to Miss Trunchbull and protect her friends. With the help of her friends and her own determination, Matilda works to overcome the obstacles in her life and find her place in the world. Miss Honey goes to see Miss Trunchbull to tell her about Matilda's exceptional intelligence and potential, but the headmistress dismisses her, leaving all children to be maggots, and boasting about her own accomplishments as a hammer thrower to justify her cruel treatment of the students. At home, Mr. Wormwood discusses his desire to sell luxury cars to some clients, and then purposely destroys Matilda's library copy of The Grapes of Wrath after she criticizes his unethical business practices. Matilda retaliates by putting super glue in his hat. At school, Matilda meets other students, including Eric, Nigel, Amanda Thripp, and Bruce Bogtrotter, who all view Cruncham Hall as a prison due to Miss Trunchbull's tyrannical rule. One of the older students tells them about the chokey, a shed in the woods used by Miss Trunchbull as a punishment for misbehaving students. Nigel is caught by Miss Trunchbull after she believes he poured treacle on her chair, and Matilda helps the other students hide him under their jackets, just as Miss Trunchbull orders everyone to line up. Matilda tells Miss Trunchbull that Nigel has narcolepsy, and the other students were just trying to protect him from getting sunburned. Miss Trunchbull, looking for an excuse to punish someone, singles out Amanda for her pigtails and violently swings her around by her hair, throwing her a great distance. Matilda continues her story for Mrs. Phelps, incorporating Miss Trunchbull as the nasty stepsister of the acrobat, who forces her to go through with a dangerous stunt despite being pregnant, due to a contract she had signed. The story is left open-ended, leaving the audience to wonder what happens next. During lunch the next day, Miss Honey tells Matilda that she will bring in a special selection of books just for her. However, Miss Trunchbull interrupts, accusing Matilda or any of the other students of stealing her private chocolate cake. While no one confesses, Bruce lets out a loud belch that smells like chocolate, revealing that he is the culprit. Miss Trunchbull offers to forgive him if he can eat a large chocolate cake made by the lunch lady, even though he is already stuffed. The other students encourage him, and he manages to finish every last crumb, even the cherries on top. However, Miss Trunchbull still intends to send him to the chokey as punishment. Despite Matilda's protests, Bruce is taken away. On their way home, the students sing songs about their dreams for the future. Matilda returns to Mrs. Phelps continues her story, in which the acrobat is forced to perform a dangerous stunt involving dynamite strapped to her body, suspended over a pool of sharks. The escapologist tries to save her, but she falls and breaks every bone in her body. The doctors are able to save her baby, but the strain of childbirth proves too much, and the acrobat dies, asking her husband to take care of their daughter. Unfortunately, the wicked stepsister takes control and mistreats the girl behind the escapologist's back. When Matilda gets home, she finds out that her father has sold his fake luxury cars to some wealthy men, despite the cars having high mileage. Disheartened by her family's lack of integrity, Matilda retreats to her room and continues her story on her own, with the escapologist discovering how cruelly his daughter is being treated. He tries to take her away from the stepsister, but he is never seen again. At school, Miss Honey tries to give the students a fun lesson, but Miss Trunchbull interrupts and forces them to go outside for a rainy physical education session, subjecting them to tough exercises. Matilda discovers that she has telekinetic powers and uses them to put a nude in Miss Trunchbull's water cup. When Miss Trunchbull blames Eric and begins to stretch his ears, Matilda uses her powers again to put the newt down Miss Trunchbull's shirt and into her pants. Matilda then shows Miss Honey her powers by making a cup float. Miss Honey invites Matilda to her home for tea and begins to tell her about her own past, including her father, Magnus, who was an escapologist, and her mother, an acrobat. Miss Honey was raised by her cruel step-aunt, Miss Trunchbull. Matilda realizes that Miss Honey's story is about her own life, and it is heavily implied that Miss Trunchbull killed Magnus. Fed up with Miss Trunchbull's cruelty, Matilda runs home in the rain and uses her powers to destroy the chokey in the woods. When Matilda returns home, she finds her parents frantically packing their bags. They explain that the wealthy men they ripped off were part of the mafia, and they have demanded their money back within 24 hours. However, Mrs. Wormwood has spent it all. In order to escape the mafia, the Wormwoods plan to flee to Spain and force Matilda to come with them. Heartbroken at the thought of leaving Miss Honey and her friends behind, Matilda leaves a note for Mrs. Phelps, explaining that not every story has a happy ending. Miss Trunchbull gathers all the students in a room as punishment for the destruction of the chokey. She reveals that she has built a new, more dangerous-looking chokey, and attempts to use it on Lavender, after making her spell a made-up word. The other students begin to rebel and intentionally misspell words, so that Miss Trunchbull cannot punish them all. She then reveals that she has made chokeys for all of them in advance. Matilda uses her telekinetic powers to write a message on the chalkboard pretending to be Magnus, frightening Miss Trunchbull. Matilda also makes Miss Trunchbull's hair look like pigtails, and manifests a humanoid figure made of chains, using it to destroy the other chokeys, and grab Miss Trunchbull by the hair, swinging her around the room like a hammer, before launching her out through the roof. After she lands, Miss Honey confronts her evil step-aunt and orders her to leave and never come back. Miss Trunchbull runs away in fear, causing all the students to cheer and celebrate their freedom from her tyranny. Mr. and Mrs. Wormwood arrive to take Matilda with them, but Miss Honey offers to adopt her instead. The Wormwoods agree, and Matilda parts on good terms with them after helping her father get his hat unstuck. She happily runs into Miss Honey's arms. In the end, Miss Honey takes over the school and renames it the Big Friendly School. Matilda keeps her friends and continues to visit Mrs. Phelps, living happily with her new adoptive mother. In conclusion, Matilda is a wonderful adaptation of Roald Dahl's classic novel that is filled with catchy tunes, memorable characters, and a heartwarming message about standing up for oneself and embracing one's unique abilities. If you're a fan of the book or just looking for a feel-good, uplifting story, we highly recommend giving Matilda a watch. Thanks for tuning in to Short Times, and we'll see you in our next recap.